Mr. Aaronstein?
Well, after going to the budget subcommittee meeting last night, I have to tell you, things are extremely tight. Even without, before you take a look at snow and ice, which they're estimating to be roughly around $300K, we're running at about a $56,000 deficit between what they're proposing next year and what we have for revenues. Now, there's been some discussion that revenues have been a little more conservatively predicted. However, the governor's budget usually shrinks with the local aid contribution. So it's unknown right now if those things become a wash or if we actually see increased revenue or not. The thing that, I won't get into it here, there are certain things that I think from a town standpoint we need to address where they're above level funded. I think if we want to go and do any type of increase beyond level funding, it's going to have to come from our own revenue generation here, at least at this point. I will say I have a hard time asking folks to pay for salary increases. If you want to play sports or you want to ride the bus to school, it's going to cost you more because we're going to pay people more. I have a really hard time with that. Granted, something like that may come to fruition. It may be a reality. But I would hope that that there's some way to avert having to have those types of things happen. I think it's in a time like this, it's where we need to tighten the belt. And so the other things that Dr. Colley had mentioned certainly go towards improving services and programs here. And I would be in favor of doing those. I have a really hard time putting anything in there that would address any type of increases in salaries at all. But I do encourage people to show up to the Board of Selectmen's meetings to take a look at some of the other budgets that are there. There's money that potentially could be pulled back. However, I think because of the deficit we have because of snow and ice, and then the other shortfall we have here because of the revenue possibilities, that we can just put it off. We can take it and spend it now and next year, but we're going to end up. It's going to have to be paid for eventually. And I think it's better to pay the bills we have now than to try to mortgage the future.
Ms. Larry, go ahead.
Through the chair. I agree with Mr. Aaronstein 100%. Yeah, exactly what I was going to say. He just, one question for Dr. Colley. You had mentioned we're realizing about a $200,000 savings from this year in special ed that you want to prepay for next year. Mm-hmm. If we're not prepaying, where we were going to realize that in this 277 above? Are we only needing, if we're going to realize $200,000 with the savings, how is that going to show up into what you're projecting for next year now?
Special education out-of-district placement tuitions is one of those few things that the state allows us to prepay. It's one of the few areas that it gives a little flexibility in order to be able to even out the idiosyncrasies of how many students out of a very small population that cost a lot of money, how you can even out your cost over a course of several years. So in other words, if we save some money this year in tuition, but we prepay that amount of money in the tuitions for next year that we expect to have, because many of our students are still in schools where, they may be 10th graders or 6th graders, so they're going to go into one more year of school, so you kind of account for those. If you prepay for them now, or you prepay for them out of this year's money, that's less money you have to allocate for next year. You can shift the cost of those tuitions to things like, let me change it. To things like, right here you have $185,000 worth of step lane increases, ASME increases, and contractual obligations, the school choice funds that we're losing, the $185,000 is a built-in cost to this budget. So if we didn't have savings somewhere else, this would have gone down the bottom line beyond, would be money we would have to find beyond the level budget. So it's kind of, we know we're going to get that savings. Conservatively say that we're going to get $100,000 towards the end of the year, that we can move to offset costs into next year, so we can take care of those increases that are built in. I mean, what people need to realize is the budget increases year to year. There are very few times that you can say a budget actually goes backwards naturally. There's things that are built into the budget that tend to increase, and we have to cover it. So the question is, if we are going to cover it, where's it going to come from?
Mr. Sullivan, do you want to add anything? Especially, I'm curious in regard to the budget subcommittee meeting last night. I don't want to put you on the spot. I'm sorry. I'm just wondering what your...
Well, sure. I'm happy to report. I agree with Tim. I recognized going into the meeting that there was not going to be any new news in the way of revenue. Ultimately, I'm concerned with the trade-offs between obligations for certain expenses and the town as a whole has and its effect on the school budget. An analysis shows that the school system will be receiving a lower percentage of the total municipal budget than we did last year. Not a huge amount. You know, it's not a drastic shift, but it's going in the wrong direction. So that's, and no solutions to that came out of the Budget Committee.
Thank you.
Because there doesn't seem to be any, as Mr. Herrenstein mentioned.
Yeah, this is really difficult. I said it last meeting, and I've said it last year. We have to improve, and like it or not, that means spending more money. No other department in the town has to do that. Very, very difficult choices here. Starting from the level funded, we're already behind the eight ball because that level funding is representing cuts that we took last year. So I'm not even comparing it to last year. I'm comparing it to the year before, and we're behind where we need to be. After listening to Mr. Herrenstein and Mr. Sullivan report on the state of the town's budget, there doesn't sound like there's any good news to me from there. But I can't see us not moving forward with some of the suggestions that Dr. Colley has offered, and it does sound like, unfortunately, in order to do that, we're going to have to generate our own revenue. It's unfortunately, certainly as a school committee, we can't take money from anywhere other than these small number of items that we have control over. It would be up to the town voters to decide if they want to spend more money on the schools versus anywhere else, or if the town wanted to decide to override the 2.5 in order to fund the things that we believe that we need to pay for. And if anybody has any ideas about what we want to do with this budget, I'm thinking if we follow Dr. Colley's updated recommendation of